We find in the New Testament this reference to the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms, all of which are said to refer to Christ. When we look at the Dead Sea Scrolls here in this left column, what we have found at Qumran, which is where the caves are in which many different scrolls and fragments of various biblical books were found, we see that pretty much everything that is in the Protestant canon is attested to. The one exception is Esther. And the question is it because Esther isn't considered authoritative, or is it just an accident of transmission? It is interesting to note which books are most attested. Certainly the books of the Torah, Genesis through Deuteronomy, we have many different witnesses to, as well as Isaiah and the Psalms. Again, is this accidental, or does this tell us about that community's valuing of various books of the Bible more than others? There is, interestingly, sort of a link between the attestations or examples of these books that have been found at Qumran and quotations of the Old Testament found in the New Testament. Very heavily Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy, Isaiah, the minor prophets, and the Psalms, which is kind of similar to what we find at Qumran. Now, I give at the bottom a list of specific books in the Old Testament that are not quoted in the New Testament. However, there are many allusions to these books that are not direct quotations, and certainly we find things in the genealogies which refer to people that are named in these books. A late Jewish work, which probably was used quite a bit in Christian circles, speaks of Ezra sort of again copying down 24 books that were kind of lost during the exile. And this corresponds to the number that is in Jewish tradition. In Jewish tradition, as we've seen in another video, the books that are considered sacred are Genesis through Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Samuel, which we count as 2 books, is considered 1. Kings, which we count as 2, is considered 1. The Book of the 12 is 1 book, and it includes all of the minor prophets. The writings, Psalms, Proverbs, Job, Song of Songs, Ruth, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, Esther, Daniel, Ezra, and Nehemiah are considered 1 book. And in Chronicles, those are considered 1 book, even though we count them as 2. Song of Songs through Esther are often found in 1 scroll together. These are books that are read on particular festival days. Now, in Christian tradition, we find somebody named Milito in 175 CE sort of listing, probably rather informally. This is not considered to be authoritative, but he's listing those books that he is seeking to get copies of. Again, Genesis through Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 4 Kingdoms, Samuel and Kings, Chronicles, Proverbs, Wisdom, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, Job, Isaiah, Jeremiah, the 12, Daniel, Ezekiel, Ezra. Ezra is perhaps including Nehemiah. Origen, writing probably in the 3rd century, created what he called the Hexapla. This is a vast work, most of which has been destroyed or lost. He had 6 columns of the Old Testament, one of Hebrew transliterated into Greek letters, and then 4 Greek translations. And he includes 22 books, 21 of which are named: Genesis through Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings, Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, Isaiah, Jeremiah, which includes Lamentations and the Epistle of Jeremiah, Daniel, Ezekiel, Job, and Esther. The 22nd is probably the 12 minor prophets, and he seems to include Ruth with Judges. However, he does also consider authoritative the books of Ecclesiasticus, Wisdom of Solomon, Tobit, Judith, and 1 and 2 Maccabees. Athanasius, writing in the 4th century, pretty much follows all of this. There are some things missing. For example, he does not list Esther, and in Jeremiah he includes Baruch, Lamentations, and the letter of Jeremiah, which is not included in our Protestant Bibles. Jerome, also writing in the 4th century, perhaps early 5th, tended to distinguish between the 24 books of the Jews, which we've looked at, considering them more authoritative, and those extra books, which are in the Septuagint. Augustine, however, and the two of them argued quite a bit about this. He lived pretty much at the same time as Jerome. He regarded the Septuagint as inspired and did not want to limit the Old Testament canon to those accepted by the Jews. And so his canon was the 24 accepted by the Jews, plus 1st and 2nd Maccabees, Ben Sira, Wisdom of Solomon, Judith, Tobit, and additional material in Daniel, Jeremiah, and Esther. Definitive listings of what is included in the Old Testament does not really get finalized until after the Protestant Reformation, at a time, at least in Europe, when the reformers tended to sideline those books of the Septuagint originally written in Greek and those accepted by the Jews. And so in Protestant canons, we tend to just accept those 24. But in the Catholic Church, the rest of these that are listed under Augustine came to be finalized and declared equally authoritative in the Council of Trent in the 16th century. I should just briefly mention that during the period of early Judaism, sort of between Ezra and Nehemiah and the time into the 1st century, you find a number of what are called pseudepigrapha. These are late works attributed to an early or famous person, but they're not written in the time of that person. It is interesting to note that in the Ethiopic Bible, the books of 1 and 2 Enoch and the book of Jubilees are all considered canonical, but they are not considered canonical in any of the other traditions.